Welcome to Surviving Roots, the podcast where we journey through the complexities of our emotions together. I'm your host, Cari, and I'm here to guide you on a path of self-discovery, understanding, and healing. In each episode, we'll explore a range of emotions and experiences, from navigating grief and trauma to managing stress and anxiety. Through candid conversations, expert insights, and practical strategies, we'll uncover the tools you need to navigate life's emotional landscape with resilience and grace. So, let's embark on this transformative journey together. Take a deep breath. Allow yourself this time. This podcast is for you. Today, I'm incredibly honored to have a truly inspiring guest with us, Duncan. Catherine is not just an integrative spiritual consultant, inspirational speaker, blogger, and minister. She embodies resilience and the pursuit of emotional and spiritual health. Surviving childhood cancer and living through a near-death experience have given Catherine profound insights into the sacredness and meaning of life, insights that she generously shares through her work and her latest book, Everyday Awakening. In a world where it's all too easy to surrender to autopilot mode and let our minds dictate our lives, Catherine's story and wisdom are a powerful reminder of the choice we have to be present and truly savor the wonder of being alive. Welcome, Catherine. I am so excited to speak with you today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on. Great to meet you.
I just want to dive deep into your remarkable journey and explore how each of us can awaken to the everyday miracles that make our lives worth living. What inspired you to write your book, Everyday Awakening? And by the way, I finished it in one weekend. I could not put it down. It was breathtaking.
That's exciting to hear. Thank you. Writing a book, I think is a calling. And I actually 10 years ago, now maybe 12 years ago, I just saw a vision of this book. I get a lot of guidance. I get a lot of intuition and knowings. And I just saw a visual picture of a book that I was going to write a book. And back then my kids were teenagers and my husband, and I just said, I think I'm going to write a book. And they thought, great, Mom. And then beginning of the pandemic, my private practice went online, which I'm grateful for. And then I just got this nudging to start. I had started already writing a blog writer, so that was really helpful. But then at night, 9 o'clock, I would pray, meditate. I'd sit at the computer and it just poured through me day after day, wow, week after week, month after month. And yeah, I had to write this book. So it just poured through me.
Well, I'm glad that you listened to that calling and that intuition, because I really, truly believe it's a book that needs to be out into the world. And so many of us need to read. I mean, what does it mean to be alive? And you mentioned the pandemic. How do you think the pandemic was a wake-up call for all of us?
The pandemic, the world grief experts say every single one of us endured grief, some kind of grief. I mean, our lives, every one of our lives changed. So we endured grief, upheaval, and just wow, life isn't going, forward as we had expected. So it was an opportunity to open to have some time to go inward. People were not out in the world. Looking at, I think for the first time, a lot of people, the amount of death we started to see and just the dramatic upheaval in the world, I think was a wake-up call for a lot of people. And just starting to look at, how am I living? What does that mean? And how am I choosing to live? I have many people in my private practice who it really jolted them to start to think about, is this really how I want to live? Is it not? And that's the purpose of why I wrote my book, Everyday Awakening, is how are you choosing to live every day? And it's choices we make.
Yeah, it's so true, because when the pandemic was happening and the world stopped, I I was able to have like such stillness, even in the midst of chaos, being in the house with 2 young kids. But you start to realize we keep our lives so busy that sometimes we really don't have time to feel or sit in it, to even know, like, check in with ourselves. Are we happy? Is this bringing me joy? Like, is this my purpose? Like, it really allowed us to just pause and recognize what was happening around us, and how we're living our lives. And speaking of life, because your book, people always say when you're reading a book, like, it should capture you almost immediately. By like the first 2 sentences, you punched me in the heart, and I was like, wow, like, you've had 2 near-death experiences. Your first was at age 11. Why do you think most people take their lives for granted, and we need these external wake-up calls? Like, why does it take those kinds of things to wake us up?
I mean, that is one path of how people really understand the preciousness of life when all of a sudden their life is threatened or they're in crisis or upheaval. And that's certainly what happened to me at 11, when one day I was fine, the next day I was gravely ill. And, the doctors told my parents I had a 20% chance to live for 2 years. And, I wasn't told that because I was so little. But I could feel that I grew up so fast, and I could feel that I was on that tightrope between life and death, going through incredibly intensive treatments for a childhood cancer. So some people come at it through crisis, through all of a sudden their life is threatened. Some people, I in the research and studying this field, because I'm so passionate about it, come through where there's an emptiness, a nudging, a longing, something's missing. And that's many people that I work with. And that's when they start to go deeper and reflect on, why am I here? And what does this mean? And then some people, through even a practice, maybe they have a meditation practice, a breath practice that starts to help them deepen. So there's different ways we come at it. People that go through crisis, that is one way. And I also witnessed this as a chaplain. I became a chaplain after being in the corporate world for years. And I was with hundreds of people at end of life and when they were taking their last breaths. And I saw so many people within a day, days before they die, just understand, oh, this is life. This is why I'm alive. And then they would die. And I just think we can all experience it now.
Yeah. I mean, I have so many questions. I want to go back to your journey through your childhood cancer, because the part of your book, it was so beautifully written, and you talk about how you felt something not of this world was present with you. I mean, you were 11 years old. Like, how do you define this? What did it feel like to connect to that? Like, how can we recognize when we are connecting to something greater than ourselves? Because you were 11, and I don't know, I'm 40 something years old. I want to know, like, how do you connect to something like that?
And it was an intense experience. I mean, so here I was at 11. I was going through really intensive treatments, and excuse me, they did have chaplains, they did have counselors. No one talked to me.
Oh, wow.
Which is amazing. As I became a chaplain, I talked to chaplain colleagues like, where were you? I mean, no one.
Yeah.
My mom was, I'd say more religious, and she would say to me, you're going to be fine. But there was no sense of reality of what was happening. And I just, out of nowhere, and faith up to that point had meant nothing to me. I mean, we intermittently would go to a Lutheran church. But I all of a sudden felt like, I wanted to live. And I started just praying, like, to the universe, like, I want to live. And actually, my prayer was, could I live to be 20? I mean, could I live to be 20? And I started praying that. I told no one. And I kept praying it. And then not long after, all of a sudden, one afternoon, this energy just flooded my body. It was just like, and it took my breath away. And it was just like, wow. And it was a knowing. It was a knowing in my depth of my being that I was going to be okay, that I was going to live. It gave me so much comfort. And I still never told anyone, which is so interesting, but it gave me so much comfort. And I have that feeling with me to this day.
That is beautiful. And I mean, it must have felt sort of lonely going through that with no one talking to you about those things. Do you think it was just because of your age and maybe they were uncomfortable because you were a child? I mean, that had to have been quite lonely. So then to come into this presence and have that being, that knowing, I mean, ah, that's
And
beautiful.
this was in the 70s, and think
Okay.
about today. So today, they have such advanced programs for children and all that. Back then, honestly, they didn't. I mean, I think chaplains would see children when there was, real extreme crisis, but it's fascinating. It is fascinating that no one did talk with me. But that truly is when my faith started. And I got through all the treatments. And interestingly, one other comment is my father, who's been gone now a number of years, there was a drug that came in that year from Turkey that was randomly being given to patients. My father demanded they give me this drug, and this drug that they gave me is now standard treatment. So for what I had, the
Wow.
survival rate is now 80%. So my father demanded they give me this drug, and so wow. It
Wow.
really propelled me after I got through all the treatments as a teenager. I started this quest of, why am I alive? And I started reading books on life and meaning and purpose and why are we here? And instead of going to parties on Friday nights, high school, I was home reading books.
Wow. Living truly living an awakened life and it's as a teenager. That's absolutely oh, I can only hope that for my kids to be awakened earlier in life rather than having to try to awaken yourself and try to connect to all of these things bigger than us later in life. I mean, that's a gift and a blessing. And so from that in your journey, then you had a second near-death experience. So what was that like? And how did your knowing and your connection to this something greater than yourself carry you through that experience?
So I went through high school, college, my family. I have a lot of older siblings, everyone in business. Business is the path in my family. So I started out in business, even though I was, so I started out in advertising. I started a couple local city magazines. And then I worked for Time Warner, Time Magazine, selling regional advertising. And it was fun. I had this amazing print job, the best in the Twin Cities, and glamorous. And I loved meeting people. But I would say 5, 6, 7 years into it, I was like, I started feeling this nudging, like, is this really where I'm called? And it was year 10. I was in Costa Rica on a timing trip, and it was for the top 10 salespeople. And we went whitewater rafting. And it was really, we shouldn't have gone. It was treacherous waters, level 3, level 4, because of rains.
Oh,
We
wow.
had a life vest, helmet, the whole thing. And I was in the corner of the boat, the end of the boat. And, I just couldn't hold the weight of the boat. And the head of our boat, Crazy, was head of, there was a Costa Rica Olympic team whitewater rafting. He was the head of our boat. All the other rafts were going around these rapids. This guy was going straight down the middle. And next thing you know, we hit a rapid and I was deep underwater. And I was like, I've thrown off the boat. And I was like, this is it. I'm going to die. This is what I feared as a child. And this image of my kids came around me, my life came around me, this white light circled my body. And this voice, crystal clear, said, living or dying is fine. And again, this peace just came through my body. And I trusted the peace. I just let go. I thought, I don't know if I'm going to live, but I just let go. And I think what happened then is I came out from under a rapid. They grabbed me. They pulled me on this boat. I was in shock. I could hardly talk. And I had to keep going down the river to get off. And interestingly, a day later, flying back to Minneapolis, I'm in a taxi coming home. I called my mother. I happened to call my mom to say, hey, I'm home. And my mom, being religious, never shared a dream in her life, said, I hadn't even told her what happened. And she said, Catherine, I dreamed that I slipped into a river and I almost drowned. And then I woke up, and it was the day that it happened.
Oh.
It's just like, wow. Here's what happened. It was a turning point. It gave me the courage to leave this really successful career to just like, I needed to hear and listen in space. Where am I being called? What is my life? And so it gave me the courage to leave Time magazine. And I had some, odds and ends jobs. And that's what started me on the path of finding theology and the path I'm on to today.
That is so beautiful. And you really, you really write about how the awakening is a whole body experience, and your life story just proves that. How do we learn to live more fully from our whole body, our heart and soul? Like, what does that mean?
I think so much of the world, so much of society, people in the US, it's so easy to live head up. We live in our mind. We're just our mind, our fast chattering ego mind runs our life. It's just like go, 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 go. So we know that we're not our thoughts. We're not our feelings. We have 60 to 80 thoughts a day. We can watch them come, go, our feelings come, go. So can you have some moments of just like take a break from your mind and just like come into your body, come in and feel your heart? Even while I'm talking right now, can you take a moment? I love this exercise of just like feeling your hands, feeling your fingers, whatever's there. Just can you sense and feel your hands, your fingers? Your thinking mind stops. It just drops you down. So moments or your breath, breathing in, feeling the coolness of the air coming in as you breathe in, the warmth as you breathe out. Just some little exercises, or using your senses where you drop into your body, you give your mind a break, you can feel, that energy, that flow in your being. That's the starting place.
That's so beautiful. And I want everyone listening to really realize this, because when I first heard the word awakening, before I read your book, I immediately go to Julia Roberts, Eat, Pray, Love. I need to go here. I need to do there. I need to have this profound journey. And what you're saying is that in every day and every choice and every experience, we have the opportunity to have these moments that can awaken us.
Exactly.
I want everybody listening to hear that. You don't need to go to Italy, and you don't need to find a new lover or eat pasta. You literally can have it in your everyday moments. We can awaken ourselves.
It's feeling the preciousness of, can you drop in and breathe and like, oh my gosh, I'm alive.
I'm alive.
Feel the preciousness of like just this moment, like, wow, the wonder, the awe. We've all had it. We've all had moments, all of a sudden you look out and you see the sun setting, and it's just the light, the hues, it's kind of magical. And you're like, kind of stops you. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's really, being aware of the fact that you're in autopilot mode, or you're living in your mind or your head, like you're saying, because I think back to when my daughter was young and my husband was diagnosed with cancer, and we were going through that. I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, praying to God, please let him be okay. Let him be okay. And he's in remission and he's completely fine. Thank God. But I always said, I'll never take our lives for granted. I'll never take our health for granted. And here we are, 2 kids in autopilot mode. And after reading your book, I actually sat down with him and I'm like, you're in autopilot mode again. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I told him all about your book and about how we should know better after everything we've been through, you've been through. And he was like, oh my gosh, you're right. And he just started talking about all these things. And I'm like, no, it can be so simple. Like, when you go for lunch, sit outside for 5 minutes and take in the sun. Or when you're having a glass of water, just think of a couple things you're grateful for. Just like connect to your life. And so we were just talking about this week how we said we would never go back into living in autopilot mode. And here we found ourselves. So it's just a good reminder to like stay committed to those awakened moments and keep going back to them, because they really don't take much time. Like you just said, like I was playing with my fingers or focusing on my breath or just really staying grateful for things. And so how did people that want to utilize these things in practice to be awakened. In your book, you have created these 5 core practices. So I'd love for you to share those. And if you could tell us a little bit about them so people can realize that it's much easier to start these things, to live an awakened life.
Yep. The 5 practices are come back to the present moment. So just we were talking about moments, just be
Moments.
here now. Love Ram Dass. If people don't know Ram Dass, must check out. But be here now, presence in just this moment, that just opens the door for everything. So cultivating, practicing, choosing to have some moments of presence. And then the second is connect with something greater. The third is grow your trust. The fourth is embody love. And the fifth is hold openness. And all these practices actually came out of organically out of my life path. And I mean, when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, I started to understand, the connecting with something greater, for example. And I must say in my work I do today and I've done over the years, I think language is limiting. And it's just, what is that for you when you tune into that flow within your being, that energy, that essence? Some people might name it energy. Some people might name it true nature or God or all, or, it's all okay.
Yeah.
But starting with, what is that within you, that sense of energy, that flow? How do you cultivate moments of just presence? And then how do you trust that moving forward? How do you open into trust, love? I mean, these are all things, I learned every step of my path.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that you have really taken your life's journey through so many things and turned it into this beautiful purpose. I mean, it's inspiring for others who have been through painful things in their life, not to allow that to push them down, but really, like you said earlier, propel. I love that you said the word propel, to propel you forward and turn it into a potential. And everything you're doing is so beautiful. And I want to go back because you said when you were younger, going through your cancer journey as a child, no one really talked to you, and you then became a hospice chaplain. And I would love to know, through this experience, like, what are some of like the greatest reminders or lessons that you witnessed or learned from your dying patients?
Mhm. And I want to also share, when I was 11, 12, 13, it's so interesting. I look back and I learned what it means to be in the moment, because if I didn't think about going the next week to the hospital to have treatment, I was okay. So I learned, interestingly, how to be so present, that it was actually not until my middle 20s when I met my then husband to be, that I didn't have a framework for thinking in the future. I didn't know how to. I had to learn how to think in the future. So,
Wow.
but the chaplain, here's one comment I would share, and it's like, be careful what you pray for. Because I got, and I was like, okay, whatever you want me to do. And and I vowed to myself, when I finished treatments, everything, I would never step foot in a hospital again. I mean, I spent my
Oh, wow.
in the hospital. And then when I stepped off the corporate ladder, with Time Magazine, and, a girlfriend late at night, a few months later, said, how about theology, spiritual direction? I'm like, oh, fascinating. Never thought of that, even though I was reading every book I could think of. And then it came to me chaplaincy, and that felt right. But then I was like, really? Like, why?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But I, swallowed courage pill. I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And then I never looked back. But going back to your question, a big gleaning, a learning from being with so many people. I worked at our level 1 trauma hospital here. I worked as a hospice chaplain. I was with so many people in crisis, but also at end of life, and just witnessed, as I was starting to say earlier, just so many people really realizing what it means to be here, what preciousness of life really means, what really matters. And I'd say the biggest takeaway is, yes, getting to sense like, this is life, the preciousness of life, but it's also understanding love. It's like, that's all that mattered. That was the number one theme I heard from people in crisis, at end of life, Love. That's it. Love. That's all that mattered. Those closest to them, the love they felt, the love, that's it.
That's amazing. And so loving their family, their friends, and then what about self-love? Because we're constantly hearing self-love, self-love. And I want to talk to you about this because in your book, you mentioned that in your 30s, you write how you experienced a turning point and even had guidance from the late Louise Hay. So I mean, your journey is just filled with like, I would love to have a million coffees with you. I have so many questions, but we only have so much time. But why is self-love so critical for us? And what guidance did she offer you?
She was a really big person on my path, reading her books, listening to her and her story, Louise Hay. If people don't know her, check her out. She was one of the first pioneers in the mind, body, spirit movement back in the 70s. A distillation of all her work, I would say, is about love. And this is my opinion, but I think we're here because to learn to love. I think when we die, we take with us our ability to love. I think how we differentiate ourselves is our ability to really love. And it does start with, and this is a gleaning, a learning from all the readings and Louise Hay, was it starts with ourselves. We can only love another to the extent that we love ourselves. We can only accept another to the extent that we accept ourselves. I mean, we only can meet another with where we are at. And love, and how do you cultivate love? I mean, I remember in my 30s, and I think I read about this in my book, I think it's what you're referring to. I grew up in a family where I didn't hear "I love you." We were Scandinavian, kind of reserved and polished and all that. And
I can relate.
yeah, and in my 30s, I remember thinking, I want to feel more love. I want to feel my heart. And so in my book, I actually have exercises. These are ones I did. And so one of them is actually two of them I'll quickly mention. One is a meditation of going to your heart and then seeing your heart and opening your heart. And I did that meditation, a version of it in my 30s, every day for 30 days.
Wow.
And it was powerful. On about the 30th day, I remember I was in the kitchen making some lunch, and all of a sudden I felt this fluttering in my heart. And I was like, I'm like, right. I'm trying to feel my heart. It's just mind, body, spirit. It's all connected holistically. Another one, this was from Louise Hay, I love. It's mirror work where you look in the mirror, you just say, I love you. I really love you. I really love you. And your name. And you say that 10 times. And I'll just as I say that, some people, it's okay. It might be hard to first look at yourself or just go with the flow, but it does work. I mean, there are ways we can grow love and feel our heart. And it all starts with how do we love ourselves? And are you choosing to really deepen how you feel and experience and can love one another?
That's so beautiful. And I think it's really important to note that it doesn't matter how old you are or what you're doing in life. You really can choose to do this and start this at any moment, whether in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. Like, it's honestly, from what you're saying and what you've learned as a chaplain, like, it's never too late. As long as don't wait till your deathbed to realize these things. You literally can take an everyday choice or experience and just become present and awaken.
Yep. I have a client right now, 92-year-old woman, healthy, vibrant, and she found me and she's like, I want to feel more. I know there's more.
Oh, I love that.
I know, she's so cool. I'm just like, what an honor to work with her.
I love that. Speaking of finding you, where can everyone find you?
You can go to my book, Everyday Awakening, everydayawakening.com. I'm all over social media. On Instagram, it's Catherine Duncan with a C, Catherine Duncan, MABCC. I'm on Facebook. My company name is Learning to Live. I'm on TikTok, Catherine Duncan. I'm actually all over, just even busy. My book. So.
I just want to thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your wisdom. I have to say again, everyone needs to read this book, Everyday Awakening. It's one of those books that you will underline everything and then you will go back to it and go back to it. And then you'll pick it up a year later and it'll just be sort of like one of those books you carry with you because the message is so important and the journey of living an awakened life, it's never too late. It's being present, self-love, loving others. I mean, you're just such full of wisdom, and I really am grateful for your time today.
So great to talk with you. Delightful. You're delightful. Thank you.
Catherine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Surviving Roots. Let's continue this conversation as a community. For more updates about the show, remember to subscribe on iTunes to leave a review. Also, there will be some special bonus footage from the show on Instagram at Cari.fund. I'll see you there.